Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for this talk about mental health and remote working. And thank you Evans Jones and Partners for setting up this fabulous initiative during Mental Health Awareness Week and for getting us all talking about the important topic of mental health. The current coronavirus crisis means that we're all very focused on our physical health, but it's also important that we talk about our mental health, particularly during this difficult time. So I'm recording this during April 2020, so a lot might change between now and when you're watching it in May, or maybe not, because we're actually in a lockdown situation in the UK and we don't actually know when that's going to be lifted. So there's been a huge rise in remote working across the country, and that's what we're going to focus on today, specifically how we can look after our mental health and perform at our best when we're having to stay at home, work from home, possibly with our partner and our kids at home too. So I'm just going to share my screen now because I've got a couple of slides to help illustrate this talk. My name's Bridget Grenville-Cleave, and I'm an expert in the application of positive psychology, which is also known as the science of well-being, in both personal and professional life. My company, WorkMad Limited, has been working in this field for well over a decade with many different private and public sector clients in the UK and abroad, ranging from a local mental health charity, the Barnwood Trust, which many of you will know of, to the government of the United Arab Emirates, where I've been working with government ministers, training civil servants in well-being and resilience tools for business. What I'm going to talk about for the next 10 minutes or so is some of the psychology-based strategies for increasing resilience and efficiency when we're working from home, and which will help you look after your mental health. Well, in fact, they're useful in all situations. And whether you're running your own business, whether you're responsible for leading and managing a team of people, or whether you're a sole trader and you work mostly on your own. So firstly, what exactly is positive psychology? Let's start with the basics. Positive psychology is the scientific study of what makes us feel good, function well, and flourish. So if we were to put psychology on a scale from -10 at one end to +10 at the other, traditional psychology would be put at the -10 end of the scale because it tends to focus more on understanding what's wrong with people, things like depression, stress, burnout, or anything that could be classified as a mental illness. And positive psychology would go at the other end of the scale because it focuses more on understanding what is right with people. So, for example, things like resilience, hope, optimism, confidence, motivation, and so on. The science of positive psychology very clearly shows that high performance, mental health, and well-being are connected. And that's why so many organisations are taking mental health so seriously. And even though positive psychology can't fix everything, what's important is that we all have the capacity to learn new techniques which can help us during difficult times and help us bounce back stronger than we were before. So it might be helpful if we think of ourselves as a mini science experiment. So be open-minded, try new things that we might not have tried before, and to compare our well-being before and after. And that's not to say that everything will work for everybody, and that's absolutely fine. But what we're aiming to achieve here is to be curious about trying new things and to then be able to gauge their impact. So what are some of the things which might affect our mental health when we're working from home, and how might positive psychology help? I'm going to share 5 evidence-based tips which I'd encourage you to try. The first thing that might affect us when we're working from home is that the decision to work from home was completely out of our hands. We're in a lockdown situation where we're expected to work remotely unless it's absolutely impossible. So leaving aside the practical issues of space and whether we have the right equipment and being able to communicate in person with our colleagues and clients, actually having no choice over the decision to work from home really affects mental well-being. And this is because feeling a sense of control over our life and what we do and the decisions that we make is a fundamental psychological need. So having some choice is important. And when it gets taken away, for example, when things are forced on us and we're made to do something that we might not want to do, can result in negativity, frustration, anxiety, and so on. And incidentally, this is why change is so hard to achieve at work, because it's usually imposed from the top and people at the sharp end often have no choice in the matter. But that's something we can talk about another time. So if we add this to the fact that we're also having to deal with a huge amount of uncertainty at the moment, as well as concerns about our physical health, homeschooling the children, and perhaps caring for our elderly relatives, it's no surprise that all of this can result in a toxic mix of frustration, anxiety, and even anger. And we might notice that we're not as patient as we are usually, that we're quicker to criticise and to find fault with ourselves and with others. And it's much more difficult to stay focused and productive at work with all these negative thoughts and emotions swirling around. So what can we do about this? Well, firstly, we have to give ourselves some time to adapt to the new situation. And flexible thinking is one of those keys to mental resilience. And although persistence is usually a strength, clinging on to things that we want when we know we can't have them is really not a rational thing to do. So we need to acknowledge that this difficulty has happened, that it's outside of our control for a relatively short period of time, and acknowledge that it's not actually going to last forever. Secondly, having allowed some time to adapt, we need to focus on what we can control. The business writer Stephen Covey suggested categorising things into 3 circles of concern. Firstly, the things we can control. Secondly, the things that we can influence. And thirdly, the things that we can neither control or influence. And we can visualise this as a series of concentric rings with the things we can control in the middle ring, the things we can influence in the next ring, and the things that we're concerned about but can't control or influence in the outside ring. So when I think of my own situation at the moment, using Covey's circles of concern, it might look something like this. In the circle of control in the middle, I could put my own and my family's health. So I can take control of this by social distancing, by staying at home except for those essential trips. I can make sure that we have some routines at home for working and for family time. And I can still connect with my families and my friends, my colleagues and my clients remotely. And this will all increase my sense of control in these difficult circumstances and boost my mental well-being. In the circle of influence, I could put my work. Okay, remote working 100% of the time is not usually what I do, and certainly not what I want to do, but I am fortunate in that I can do some of my work from home and some of it online. So for example, instead of face-to-face training and coaching, which I would usually do, I can do some of it online. And at this time of the year, for example, I would usually be working face-to-face with a group of young Americans. And instead of doing that face-to-face, I've adapted what I usually do so that we can meet and talk online. And in the circle of concern, I could put the economy. So like all of you, I'm sure I'm very concerned about it and what will happen in the next few months and years and how it's going to affect my business. But I'm not the Chancellor and I'm not a lobbyist, so it's not something I can directly control or influence right at this moment. So what psychologists recommend we do to maintain high well-being and resilience is to focus only on those things that we can control and can influence, and that we actually put aside everything else. The third tip to boost mental health and resilience is about creating routines. Another way in which we can re-establish some control over our home and work life and increase our focus and performance when we're working remotely is through being as organised as possible, planning our time and setting up new routines. The following technique is especially useful if you're having trouble concentrating and getting things done when you're working from home. And I don't know about you, but during this lockdown, it sometimes felt a bit like a holiday. I have to remind myself what day of the week it is. And some of us work much better when we have a deadline, but how we set our deadlines really matters. Psychology research shows that the mind takes more notice of deadlines when they appear closer to us in time, and our mind tends to ignore those which appear further away. So when it comes to work, it's more important to plan for the immediate future, what we're going to do in the next hour, what we're going to do by 5 o'clock today or tomorrow morning, than it is to think about those things that we need to get done next month, say, or next year. So make your deadlines closer to you in time than further away. Another thing that even experienced remote workers often struggle with is procrastination and distraction. And this can really affect how we feel. And getting to the end of the day, realizing that we haven't really achieved very much can be quite disheartening and can really lead to a downward spiral. So try not to beat yourself up if you struggle to get started or stay on task during the day. Fortunately, research shows that routines and habits are really helpful in overcoming both procrastination and distraction. Another top recommendation is called the Pomodoro technique, which is where you set a timer for 25 minutes at a time and focus only for this long. So after the 25 minutes is up, take a 5-minute break, get up, move around, make a cup of coffee, and then you repeat that. So you do this 4 times before you take a much longer break, say 20 or 30 minutes. And even when you've got several hours at your disposal, dividing your time up into these smaller, manageable chunks tricks the mind into focusing and staying focused. And so you'll be able to achieve much more. And one final tip to help overcome procrastination and increase your productivity is to leave loose ends. And by this, I mean taking 5 minutes at the end of every day to make a start on a task that you're actually going to do tomorrow. So you just brainstorm a few ideas, maybe start an email, do a few minutes of research online. And this technique works for several reasons. Firstly, when you know that you don't actually have to finish the task tonight because it's actually a task for tomorrow, the pressure is off and the ideas come much more quickly. And this is really another reason why positive emotions, positivity, are so important at work. And secondly, psychologist studies show that it's far easier to continue to work on something that you've already started than it is to get started in the first place. So by making a start today, even a little one, your mind will be tricked into picking up the task much more easily tomorrow. So there you go, 5 evidence-based tips to help support your mental health and get you more focused and be more resilient when you're working from home. So acknowledge the things will change. They're not going to stay like this forever. Focus only on what you can control directly. Break your time down into smaller chunks, even if you've got a lot of time at your disposal. Make sure your deadlines are set closer to you than further away, and make a small start on tomorrow's task today. And remember to treat yourself like a science experiment. So try things out, see how you get on, and hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised. So positive psychology, the science of well-being, has a lot more to offer in terms of boosting mental health, resilience, and well-being in the workplace. So if you want to know more, or if you have any questions about training, do get in touch. So I hope this has been helpful. Thank you very much for watching, and thanks once again to Evans Jones and Partners for organising this event for Mental Health Awareness Week.